Friends, we gather this morning in a place we call a sanctuary, a word rooted in refuge, safety, and welcome. For generations, our sanctuaries have been havens from a world that can feel harsh and chaotic. But sanctuaries can also become familiar in ways that quietly narrow us. Theologian Rebecca Parker reminds us, the opposite of faith is not doubt, but certainty. And sometimes certainty becomes its own kind of shelter. James Luther Adams warned that when churches become protective associations, they can also preserve what feels comfortable, rather than his propulsive fellowships where we stretch out toward who we might become. Sophia Lyon-Foss taught us it matters what we believe. But I want to add, it matters even more what we practice. Today I want to name two shadows that haunt liberal religion: cultural elitism and the cult of privacy. I'll explain it, and our interim minister wrote a thesis on it, so she helped me a bit. They seem like opposites, one pushing people away through superiority, the other pulling inward toward requisite intimacy. But they share the same root, the desire to be comfortable rather than the courage to be transformed. Adrienne Marie Brown writes in Emergent Strategy, "Small is good, small is all. The large is a reflection of the small. Our small congregational habits create large patterns of exclusion." First, the shadow we rarely name. When we dismissed the old walls of theology, remember that Article 2 of the UUA bylaws defines our freedom of belief. Congregations may establish statements of purpose, covenants, and bonds of union, so long as they do not require that members adhere to a particular creed. Instead, we built walls out of culture. We say all are welcome, but consciously or unconsciously hum beneath it. As long as you already know how to be like us. Second, the shadow of that our interim minister, Reverend Kathy Tu Rickey, named in her essay, A Cult of Privacy, What May Keep Unitarian Universalism from Going Public. When we let endemic, empty, self-controlled individualism turn inward to the private and the purely therapeutic, we undermine the impetus toward public forms of worship and public engagement on the part of our congregations. Have we become private and protected islands of piety, as she says? Intimate family circles that cannot tolerate conflict or welcome true strangers? Do we seek harmony over justice, comfort over courage? These two, cultural elitism and private practice, aren't opposites. They're the same retreat from the creative tension through which congregations grow. You can let it keep going. Our covenant, let me get back to where I was, sorry. Any other phones? One excludes through sophistication, the other through sentimentality. Both avoid the sacred friction that makes our transformation possible. Now, in our covenant, we dwell together in peace, seek the truth in love, and grow together in harmony. But it doesn't tell us how to handle disruption or prophetic witness, or how to tell the difference, how to hold multiple truths simultaneously, or live together in disharmony. Our covenant focuses on a personal and communal quest, not a relational accountability. This is not a criticism of our covenant. Our covenant is beautiful and it serves us well. But it is an acknowledgement of how our spiritual life has evolved, or rather, collapsed toward the pole of comfort. When Francis David declared we need not think alike to love alike, he was naming our greatest gift and our deepest temptation. Because when we dismantled theological conformity, we unconsciously built cultural conformity. Reverend Sophia Betancourt calls us to shed the armor of the past, but we've replaced theological armor with cultural armor, equally rigid, equally exclusive. Now, we've been told, in one way or another, we must choose individual authenticity or community conformity, personal freedom or collective belonging, speaking our truth or keeping the peace. This false choice creates what psychologists call the empty self, cut off from the community, looking inward for meaning, consuming comfort like a commodity. But there's another way. What if the tension between authenticity and belonging isn't a problem to solve, but an engine of transformation? You see, in physics, tension creates potential energy. Let me show you something. This is creative tension. Different strings, different notes, held in tight relationship. But this is what happens when we avoid all tension. When we're so committed to comfort that we go slack. No music. No life, just nothing. And so, we think the answer is to tighten our boundaries, our beliefs, our belonging. We make the walls higher, the rules stricter, the culture more uniform. If they'd just believe like us, vote like us, speak like us. See, that's not music either. That's just broken. A community with no tension is dead. A community with too much tension breaks. And the music, the beloved community, lives and navigates in that tension, in the space between. Here's what science tells us about this. In 2024, meta-analysis from Ohio State University, they studied over 10,000 participants across 154 studies on anger. The researchers discovered something that challenges our cultural assumptions. Venting doesn't reduce anger, it increases it. We've been told to blow off steam, to get it off our chest, to find a rage room and smash things. But researcher Brad Bushman found there's not a shred of scientific evidence to support catharsis theory, as they call it. In fact, venting reinforces aggression. Have we not seen that over the last fill-in-the-blank number of years? What does work? The very practices that our newly forming Healthy Relations team embodies. Breathing through the tension, presence to each other, progressive relaxation, and taking a sacred pause. Not because they suppress anger, but because they transform our physiological arousal. They literally change how anger lives in our bodies. This is why creative tension isn't about venting or suppressing emotions. It's about what researcher Sofia Jervik calls turning down the heat while staying present to the conflict. When we breathe through tension rather than explode through it, we maintain the energy needed for transformation without breaking the strings. This is the creative tension of belonging, where individual freedom and collective responsibility don't cancel each other out, but deepen each other through engagement. Theologian Palmer Parker defines the tragic gap as the space between harsh realities and what we know is possible, urging us to stand in the tension between cynicism and idealism, holding both despair and hope to find authentic action. This is my Christmas gift to you. Not by closing the gap, but by learning to live within it. Like a broken open heart, as Parker calls it, gaining capacity for the world's suffering and joy. Now, holding tension comes at a cost, but it does not leave you empty-handed. Held long enough, something always emerges because that's how nature works. I'd like to share what I observed while trying to be a neutral party, a mediator for discernment during our Article 2 crisis last year, because it took a toll on my body and it triggered my midlife crisis. It's okay, you can laugh. That crisis of meaning eventually gave birth to the spiral of becoming, the threads of becoming, and the creative tension of belonging, this framework that I'll share with you today. But first, let me name what I learned didn't work. Number one, trying to find a middle ground of common values did not work. Say it with me. Did not work. Why? Because watered down compromise leaves everyone unhappy and feeling unheard with unmet needs. Number two, solving core identity issues through democratic processes, say it with me, did not work. Why? Because listening to prophetic voices or systemic challenges is hard. So let's talk about, I'm sorry, I skipped something. Why? Because majority rule separates beloved community into us versus them thinking, and leaves up to half of the community feeling unheard, unrepresented in the resolution. Number 3, avoiding conflict through spiritual bypass, say it for me, did not work. Why? Again, because listening to prophetic voices and systemic challenges is hard, so let's talk about God and our experience of the great mystery. It leads us, which, by the way, that's not a bad thing, it's beautiful, and we should continue to do that in our adult education and spiritual lives, but it leads us to embrace the idyllic peace and harmony of our aspirational covenant. The underlying crisis is left to fester and reappear when provoked again. Next time, with different issues and different actors. Every congregation develops familiar rhythms in how it moves through conflict. At UEFBR, we've weathered several, maybe dozens, of intense moments, times when big questions or big feelings led to deep division. These moments didn't happen because anyone lacked goodwill. They happened because we didn't yet have shared practices for holding tension together and for holding each other through the tension. When conflict feels overwhelming, communities often react in predictable ways: retreat, fragmentation, resignation. These aren't moral failings. They're human responses to feeling threatened, while also being unprepared and under-resourced. Our choice now is not to judge the past, but to build the capacity we need for a different future. Here's a basic truth about every community. Right now, in this room, each of us exists somewhere on or between the 4 points of this spectrum of belonging. Over here on the left, number 1, you've got coerced belonging. I must think, vote, speak like you to belong. Number 2 is dutiful belonging. I should fit in to keep the peace. Number 3, and this is getting better, I want to be part of this covenant. And at the far end is number 4, integrated belonging. My authenticity and our community strengthen each other. Now, the movement along this spectrum isn't automatic. It requires practice. It requires staying with difficulty rather than smoothing it over. And the lesser truth is that we're all somewhere along this spectrum of belonging in different areas that we engage with in our fellowship. Now, here's the hard truth. When church becomes family, it begins to exclude those with whom it cannot be warm and intimate, giving a cliquish, unhealthy vibe to newcomers. What we may not have in our nuclear family, I can't talk about my values with my own siblings, we bring here to our chosen family. Here, I can share my liberal causes, which are all good, but think about what we're building here. Family-based communities require everyone to be similar enough for comfort. But covenant-based communities are different. They're held together not by the warmth of shared intimacy, but by the fire of commitment. We have it as our symbol. It's a fire. It burns things. It transforms things. Not by the sameness, but by shared practice in how we treat each other. Not by avoiding conflict, but by metabolizing it into wisdom through the chalice as crucible. In substituting James Luther Adams' protective associations as sanctuaries for sameness, we prevent ourselves becoming his propulsive fellowship. In fact, making us minimally effective in carrying out our mission in the world. A covenant says, we will stay at the table especially when it's hard. That is why we need covenant in community. Let me share a bit of what that looks like going forward. Once it is formed, our Healthy Relations team will help us embody 3 commitments that transform how we hold tension. Number 1 is voice. This speaks to our autonomy. Every person's authentic expression is sacred. But voice without relationship is just noise. We practice speaking truth with each other, not at each other. Healthy Relations asks, are all voices being heard and self-determined? Number 2, growth. This speaks to our competence as a beloved community. Conflict becomes curriculum. Every disagreement teaches us something about ourselves and each other's needs. Healthy Relations asks, what skill or understanding needs development here? And number 3, connection. This is our relatedness. We hold difference as generative. The stranger brings gifts, not just needs. Disagreement becomes a path to deeper trust, not a threat to unity. Healthy Relations asks, how can connection be maintained as we disagree? These 3 basic needs are borrowed from self-determination theory by R.L. Ryan and E.M. Deci, a major contribution to positive psychology. When any of these collapses, when voice is silenced, growth is blocked, or connection is severed, we retreat back into the comfortable shadows of venting, gossip, and scapegoating. Our Article 2 values and covenants place love at the center, surrounded by justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, generosity, and interdependence. The threads of becoming gives us a way to practice those values, not as ideas, but to live those covenants as embodied habits. You see, love invites us into presence with each other. Justice asks for consent and mutuality. Equity calls us to release old hierarchies. Transformation requires a sacred pause, not conflict avoidance. Pluralism lives in our bodies, not only our minds. Generosity grows from humility and invitation to new ideas, the mystery we have not yet considered. Interdependence draws us back to one another again and again in a spiral of growth. We don't perform these perfectly, but with an amended behavioral covenant, this can become our shared practice. Reverend Kenneth Patton wrote, "We build on foundations we did not lay." Our Healthy Relations team will help us build our new foundations using what we call creative tension. A community that can't handle internal difference can't engage external injustice. I'll say that again. A community that cannot handle internal difference can't engage external justice. You might have a few individual crusaders out there, sorry about the word crusader, people out there standing for the cause, but the community won't be doing it because we'll be stuck on our internal differences. If we need everyone to think alike about small things, how can we stand together against oppression? As Reverend Dr. Mark Morrison Reed teaches, the central task of the religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind us to all. But first, we must acknowledge the bonds that exclude. The creative tension of belonging isn't just personal work, it's training for public engagement. The fire of commitment hardens our resolve when we let the chalice burn and become crucible. Every time we practice staying with difference here, we build capacity to engage difference in the world. So I ask you to pause for 1 minute while our music director, Marina, reprises the prelude. I want you to think about our coffee conversation question. It is this: the crucible purifies. What are you actually willing to let burn? The crucible purifies. What are you actually willing to let burn? So here's my invitation. Not to eliminate tension, but to honor it as the condition of growth. When someone walks through our doors who votes differently, prays differently, speaks differently than we do, the future of our faith rests not in making them like us, but in discovering what we become together. This is, beloved, community, not a place where everyone agrees, but where disagreement deepens rather than destroys relationship. We can remain a sanctuary, safe, comfortable, and slowly dying, like every other small congregation in our nation. We can continue to escalate our interpersonal conflicts by the dozen each year. We can repeat our 3 to 5 year cycle of congregational rupture followed by mass exoduses. Each time, the same core tensions with different people. Do you know what will happen? Because unskillful ways lead to undignified failures. Or we can become a crucible where the heat of difference forges something new. Look, the world doesn't need another private club for the like-minded. It needs communities brave enough to demonstrate that difference isn't division, that conflict can create rather than destroy, that people can hold creative tension together until something new emerges. Our upcoming Hope for Us journey in January isn't punishment for some or enrichment for only a few. It is a prescription for the systemic sickness afflicting UFBR for decades. It takes all of us, or none of us will succeed, until but a few will remain to do the work. May we remember Dr. Cornel West's words: justice is what love looks like in public. And love requires both authenticity and belonging, held in creative tension. The spiral teaches nothing is final, nothing is fixed, all is becoming. May we choose the crucible. May we choose the tension. May we choose becoming. So may we become. May it be so. Blessed be.